And then these are some other out-of-class activities that actually cost money, but if you're desperate and you haven't gone to your activities yet, you're welcome to go, and there's some awesome speakers. So these are actually posted. I think I sent these out in an email, so you can refer to that. And our speaker for our last class will be April 8th, and it will be Susan Prater of Imagine Learning. Now we will have an opening prayer by Rich Scott.
Heavenly Father in heaven, we're very grateful to be here and to learn more about entrepreneurship. We ask that we will learn it well from what we have to hear and listen, and this is we pray in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Okay, you're up.
Because I always forget. Well, welcome to class today. It's my pleasure to introduce Kimberly Jones. She founded Verite based on a vision for taking media to a digital communications platform. After over 12 years in Silicon Valley, marketing and selling everything from high-end file servers and workstations to programmable chips, Kim Jones moved to Utah for a change. Upon arriving, she immediately began working in the broadcast, film, and video production market, selling Sony Broadcast for a reseller based in Salt Lake City. Now she's the CEO of Verite. She's focused on digital production for sales, marketing, and training communications, as well as web-based business applications. For over 15 years, she's been the driving force behind the company's growth and project accomplishments. She's also the chairman of the board for the Utah Women Technology Council and a trustee on the Westminster College's MBA Advisory Board. I will tell you, after doing this for a few years, it is very rare to find a woman who is involved in technology in this area, and particularly one who's a woman entrepreneur. So we're really excited to welcome Kimberly Jones.
I have this on. Testing. Now I do. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm honored to be here and to be able to speak with you. And on that note, talking about women in technology in Utah, I will just do a brief little plug for the Women Tech Council. And if you'd like, be sure to check it out at womentechcouncil.org. We're a Utah-based organization, although we have interest everywhere from other states in the nation to India. So our model is starting to take shape, and our objectives there are to really foster the technology community, not only for women, but to provide a resource for businesses in the community that have to be women. And there are, surprisingly enough, quite a few women CTOs and women CEOs and technology engineers in the state. So we have a captive audience. We have about 500 opt-in members and about 350 fully signed up membership form members. So we're growing, and if you're interested in technology as a career you're thinking about possibly exploring, it might be of interest to you. I think before I can talk about Verite today, it'd probably be good to bring you up to speed on where we are now as a firm, so you can kind of understand what we do. And I think the best way to do that is going to be to show you our reel. So I'd like to just take a moment. I'm going to try to blend the volume of the audio with just a little tutorial on why we did what we did with some of these various productions for clients. It's just a small representation, actually, of what we do. So if you can dim the lights for me back there, I'm going to hope I'm wired for sound here. Well, primarily about 70% technology clients, although we have quite a few other clients in professional services, travel and tourism, healthcare. Intel is a big client for us. We do everything from training programs for Intel to some of their channels, their distribution channels, campaigns for marketing, as well as e-learning, and quite a bit of custom web development. We also do interactive interactive games that are used for viral marketing purposes, and we've done a number of different games for a number of companies. Here's just a brief example of one that we did for a reseller group within Intel. Symantec Corporation, the antivirus people, another big customer of ours. We work with Symantec worldwide. This is representative of their lobby kiosk. This production is in Symantec facilities worldwide on flat panel displays. We do worldwide email marketing campaigns for them, as well as demos, tutorials, and other types of things that involve their training and certification programs. We do launch kits for sales where you can go to a seamless web-based interface and immediately access sales information that you need to get out to customers about a particular product when you need to get really targeted. This particular presentation is in Symantec's global headquarters in Cupertino. This is about the security risk in the world, and what this production does is it has lots of dynamic information that comes through to it, and it gets security information from centers located all over the world and displays that on that map that you saw. Interleaf Electronics out of Southern California. Primary competitor is Logitech. They do lots of hardware for presentations and other types of products. We did a web store for them as well as a complete overhaul of their website and their presence for investors and public relations people. We do a lot for Novell. We've done a lot in their training and channel organizations. We do DVDs. We work with BrainShare with them. They use web tools worldwide. Overland Storage is a company out of Southern California that does hardware, RAID storage devices, and Sun software in the storage business. We've done everything from establish their web presence to doing lots of little web tools that allow people to immediately see if they like the product, if the product meets their specifications. That was a little slider tool, which is kind of cool. Omniture we've worked with for years. We do public presentations for them. We've done lobby kiosk work for them. And we also do very, very confidential IPO and high-level positioning presentations to Josh Vance, their CEO. Helios is a Canopy Group company founded by Canopy, Ray Norder's organization. They do digital signage, and we're actually a partner of theirs because we produce presentations for digital signage. And we also do installs for digital signage. We're doing one for Symantec right now worldwide. We work with the Rio Tinto group of companies. We just finished up their major advertising campaign. Lambda Software is another client of ours in the technology space. Again, we do a lot of communications, a lot of web tools, that sort of thing for technology companies like Lambda. We get to do some 3D work and things where it really involves a complex topic, and this is carbon fiber. We were asked to actually go in and take wireframe drawings of all this equipment. They were trying to sell this large equipment in Europe, and they needed a way to convey the benefits to it. And they certainly, photography just wasn't going to do it. So we actually went inside the equipment and brought the equipment to life for a European trade show. Avocent is another technology company trying to get a lot of messaging out about hardware and software. They actually bought Lambda software, so as a result, we work with both organizations. We do a lot of entertainment. We've worked with Aya and some other companies. Liz Greer is a high-end artist and web Asian fusion designer out of San Francisco that we do shopping cart and web development for. This is a company we used to work for, although they pulled out of Utah. They no longer have a presence here. A data center company that was trying to do a drastic overhaul of their image. And in web development, perceived value is everything. So that was just kind of an overhaul. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about what Verite does. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint presentation. I'd like to just be a little more casual than that. And what I want to talk about today is about companies and entrepreneurs that are not funded by venture capitalists. I'm sure that you've had an ongoing series where you're seeing a little bit of a couple different points of view, and one of them is that company where the VCs are in there, they're doing multiple rounds of funding, and they're sponsoring the CEO. That's one way to start a company, and I actually work a lot with VCs. I was chair of the board of the Utah Tech Council, so I had a lot of exposure to VCs. I've helped with the BYU business plan competition a couple times myself, and I'm very familiar with that model. That's not the model I chose for Verite. I chose the long, slow boat to China model called self-funding. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I want to go back 20 years because I think it's relevant to my discussion today. 20 years ago, I met my husband, and he was a BYU graduate that had moved to Silicon Valley, and I met him at a water skiing trip, actually, with a bunch of people that were all there, married people, couples, things like that. It was a weekend up in Northern California. And over time, as we dated and got to know each other, he kept bringing me back to Utah, a state I had never visited before in my life. And I grew to love the beauty, the mountains. We were both skiers, golfers, so it was a perfect fit. Little did I know 20 years ago that I would find myself moving here. And I wound up moving here in 1990 from Silicon Valley. I had had a 12-year background in business development for technology products, both software, hardware, server-based. I would say, at the peak of my career. I had just made major progress with my career, had received a promotion from my boss, and was plugging along quite nicely when I decided to leave the job, move to Utah. In 1990, it was very slow around here economically. So it was a big jump economically. But I decided I was going to go ahead and give this state a try, and I'm really glad I did because it allowed me to grow a vibrant business here with no limitations. So that is a very good thing. When I got here, I went to work for a reseller of Sony Broadcast. What I wanted to do in technology just wasn't available, and I decided since the Sony Broadcast has had chipsets in it, close enough to technology for me, so I was going to go work for them. So I worked for a reseller downtown, and I sold switchers and editing bay equipment, lighting, cameras, and as a result I got to know a lot of film producers, TV station people, people that I customarily in my career actually never dealt with before. So that was really nice. I actually was offered a job to go work for an actual film production studio in the old Osmond Studios down in Orem, which is the Ventura Media building off of 800 North. So I went down there, and I found myself in a very exciting position. I was able to not only do business development for this company, but I was able to bridge over to production. And I had a real interest in that. I was very interested in communicating, and one of the reasons I was interested in communicating was the tech business that I'd just come from were some of the worst communicators on the planet, especially in sales and marketing environments. The fact sheets and white papers and materials that came out of these companies were atrocious. And I wondered often, being in the early days of that business, and trying to sell their products, how do you sell when you've got all this ugly looking stuff that only engineers really can relate to? So I had a real interest in communication. I was very excited. I went to produce video for this company. I really enjoyed it. We worked with a number of large companies, Avon Cosmetics, Herbalife out of Southern California, as well as a variety of network marketing companies, which was a new ground for me. I was not familiar with network marketing at the time, or multi-level marketing. I got very familiar with it. I never felt completely grounded because I was working with an industry that I wasn't totally familiar with, but I was really happy producing, getting to understand what goes on in the edit bay, starting to understand why a script is so critical when you're trying to get everybody on the same page about producing something. All of that I found very, very interesting. After about a year and a half, I went to the CEO of that company and I said, you know, I think tech companies would use what we do a lot. And videos were nothing new. That's not really what I was talking about, but I was talking about taking video and putting it on CD-ROMs. And this is 1993. People weren't doing that a lot. I mean, I think CD-ROM drives just started to get into, you know, big, huge, clunky desktop units. So there just wasn't a track record there. Well, he just poo-pooed the whole idea and said, you know, not going to happen for 5 years, get back to work, basically. Well, I decided that part of the emptiness I felt in my career was that I wasn't working with the audience I'd spent so many years working with to begin with, which is that technology customer, the Novels, the Intels, the Symantec's of this world. So I decided that I was going to go home and talk my husband into letting me quit my job and with nothing more than a LaserJet 3 printer from Hewlett-Packard and a Dell desktop, start a business with no big business plan either. Believe it or not, he actually said okay. So he said, you have a year, however. You have a year to get your act together and make money and contribute to the household again. We were raising 2 kids. I had no business starting a business, really. So I'm not your typical CEO. I wasn't this, serial entrepreneur. I would say I'm a quasi-visionary, but I wouldn't categorize myself into a common category for your typical CEO. So that's what I did. I started from my house. And at first I was like, well, it'll work out good. I can keep my eye on the kids. I can work out of the house. We'll start a virtual consortium. This is going to be easy. In a year, I'm going to be making money. Everything's going to come together beautifully. So let my story begin. I think I called the title to this presentation, 15 Years of Entrepreneurialism, Lessons Learned, and Flying by the Seat of My Pants. And I'm happy to say that I am still doing the third thing all the time. That hasn't changed. So I got started in 1993. To give you a little perspective, my initial idea was to take all of these channel partner materials, so technology distribution channel partners, take all their materials and put them on a CD with a tour so that people who were like Novell partners could have key sales information by type of partner they were, and people could access that information, and as a Novell partner they could buy their products with the endorsement of Novell. So I went in to pitch this idea. This lady happened to hear about me and called me and said, nobody at Novell had done a CD yet. Could I please bring some samples of my work in? Well, I decided instead, if I told her over the phone I didn't have any samples of my work, she probably wouldn't have given me the meeting. So I went down to Novell and proceeded to tell this lady, look, it's not like you're going to find a boatload of samples from people. There aren't a ton of people doing it. I know I can do it, but I don't have anything to show you. Would you please give me a chance? And she did. She decided to take a chance and gave me the project. Little did I know I was going to lose, a ton of hair over the course of the next 6 months and have one heck of a time trying to put her CD together because there was no Macromedia or Adobe in 1993. There was a plethora of tools for doing multimedia interfaces, but none of them were established. None of the companies were big, and many of them didn't work. And one little company at the time, Apple, had what they called the media kit, and they were going to be the big players in multimedia authoring, and we were going to do our CD with that. What better than Apple to decide to go ahead and author CD with? Well, it didn't work. They just weren't, the product wasn't mature enough. The technology hadn't come along enough. We went to do one set of materials where we're scanning floppy disks. Does anybody even know what a floppy disk is in this class? And we would scan documents and turn them into imaging documents. There weren't PDFs or anything. So we had to kind of use this outdated old technology to put the materials together and figure out what technology were we going to use to go ahead and author the CD with. Well, at the end of the day, Novell had bought a company called Appware. They had a software product that looked like it might be able to work for authoring CDs. So we gave it a try. We did a beta proof of concept, and as it turns out, that would work. My only problem with that was instead of a bunch of, artsy-fartsy, cutting-edge advertising type folks that I needed to be surrounded by on the communications end of it, I found I needed to be surrounded by a bunch of super geeks on the computing side of it, because to use this tool, you had to understand object-oriented programming. So, mistake number one. Big mistake number one. There were several, but this is the big mistake number one. So I went ahead and I found a couple super geeks. One in particular I decided to make the lead architect on the project. And I didn't have any agreements in place. Because everything I'd done up until that time, we agreed. There was a handshake. The whole idea of having somebody sign an agreement with me actually made me a little bit uncomfortable. And I had this very naive point of view that if you generally think somebody's a pretty good person, you just craft a handshake agreement or a verbal agreement and you're good to go and everybody feels good and everything else, right? Well, the problem with that is there are a couple of different reasons why people break agreements. One is they're just rotten people. Two is their understanding of the agreement is different than your understanding of the agreement, and nobody put it in writing. So when it comes down to it, you're just not on the same page with that individual. Well, in my business, when you start dealing with software, graphics, lots of intellectual property, I realized I needed to get all over that one right away. Unfortunately, the very first programmer I worked with on this project decided halfway through it that he was just going to call my Novell contact and tell her, I don't know what Kim Jones is really bringing to the party. I can program this thing all on my own. So, why don't you just work with me? Well, he was young and naive, and people are still loyal. And Novell actually asked that I stop working with the individual, and we had to start over with another programmer, and I learned a very important lesson. If I'd had an agreement with this individual in the first place, probably wouldn't have had those kinds of problems. So early on in with the company, I decided we were going to, get professional, get solid agreements with people, whether they're contractor agreements, employee agreements, whatever, and we were going to make sure that we run well, because it would become apparent over the years how many other challenges I would have. I needed that to be a no-brainer. So we moved on. So we developed the CD. We started to get work from iOmega. We were taking little Ditto drives and making them sound like motorcycles and running them across the screen for sales campaigns. And we were doing some pretty fun things. Then in about 94, end of 94, this thing called the Internet started to emerge. And, when I first came across the Internet, I just saw it as one more thing to do. This website idea, I was like, I don't have time for a website. I just, at that time, anytime you wanted to do graphics or any kind of production You had to take boards to people. We did very little out of state at that time because it was such a laborious process. I had no idea that the internet also meant email. And email would be the springboard to exponential growth with my business. Because no longer did you need to take graphics on boards to people, flow charts, things like that. You could start emailing people stuff. It was amazing. I was so happy. I mean, the volume of work we could do and the fact that we could go international was very, very appealing. However, little mistake number 2. At the time, a lot of people didn't have sites. This idea of getting a domain and doing all that stuff was fairly new. I certainly didn't want to deal with the domain, so I just kept using tilde verite, which was because I was hosted by email by Xmission, who essentially I just used their domain. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this because I don't even know if any of you are familiar with this. But for a while there, early on in, not a lot of companies had verite.com. They just went to a company like Xmission or Via West or whoever and used their domain names, and as a result there were a number of tildes. There was a little tilde symbol. It worked great for email, and that was my primary interest because the light bulb on the email thing went off for me right away. So when we started to design our website, I'm talking one night to my husband, who also happens to be in the technology business. He works for IBM. And I said, you know, I'm going to do this web address, and it's going to be tilde verite. And he said, you can't do that. He said, what are you thinking? And I said, what do you mean? And he says, this tilde verite thing's going to go away. Do you think everybody's going to just keep using Xmission's domain? People are going to get their own domains. You need to go get your own domain and become verite.com. Well, I just poo-pooed the whole idea. I was just like, one more thing to do, not free, because tilde verite was free, and not interested. Well, he felt so strongly about it, he woke up the next day and he said, I implore you, do not do the tilde verite thing. If you're going to listen to anything I have to say in the whole history of your business, this is it. So I thought, man, I'm driving to work going, why is he making such a big deal out of this? And now today I completely understand. It's kind of like going to a black tie event in jeans and a t-shirt. I mean, it's just not done. And tildes went away. And it was uncool very soon after that. So I was very, very happy that I decided to go ahead and listen to him, even though I didn't essentially get it, and do this tilde verite. So we got on the web, we got on email, things started to accelerate. We found ourselves working internationally with a lot of our clients. I found myself out in Silicon Valley a lot more, working with clients that we still work with today that are headquartered in Silicon Valley and have locations here, vice versa. So it really allowed for a period of growth. Unfortunately, at the time, when I first started working on the web, there were only a few people who even knew what HTML was. And that presented a lot of challenges. You would crack up at the types of people that I had to go get HTML work done. You know, engineers and software engineers were actually working on HTML. They don't do that anymore because it was new and there were a lot of kinks with it. And again, early adoption. People didn't understand it. Well, for me, I'd already had a lot of early adoption. I thought my early adoption days were over. I already did the CD thing, lost a lot of color there, already did the DVD authoring thing. And then along comes people who want to be able to have conferences and events, and they want people to be able to go to a website and say, yes, they're going to go to that user group conference. And the company actually wants a database that has a list of everybody who's going, and that's what we call dynamic web apps today. Well, that's kind of where we started with them, was just people telling us, this is what we want to get done, and this is what we want the database information to reflect for us. Very new, again, at the time. I'm like, oh, brother, here we go again. I'm going to have to go ahead and explore this new technology on the web and get a bunch of geeks surrounding me again, and, you know, the whole 9 yards all over again. One of the best decisions I ever made. The reason why is because as the years went on, and this is from like 95 to 2000, the advances we made in event registration on the web, which is one of our web tools that we offer. We do event registration for Novell worldwide. E-commerce, taking payment over the web, testing and certification programs, and content management, which is very, very critical over the web. All my web suite of web-based applications started to surface at that time. And now represents 50% of our business. So it was a very, very exciting time for the company. We moved into a building in Draper in 1998. I bought a small little office condo. Mistake number 3, office condos don't appreciate. They lose money as a rule. Mistake number 3B, you can only fit about 12 people in the average office condo. So 2 years later, I'm growing like crazy. I've got people working remotely. I've got over 12 people in the office condo. So in the conference room, we've got people working in the conference room. That's their desk. I mean, it was pretty bad. I felt like a sweatshop owner in India. Okay, maybe not India. So anyway, it was a challenging time. Decided that we would take the big plunge. And we decided to sell that office condo where we lost all kinds of money and buy a bigger building in Sandy, buy a 12,000 square foot building and fix it up. So that's what we did. So I have quite a bit of space for growth. It was a good investment because buildings are very good investments. And the location was superb, given the fact that we work with companies all the way from Ogden to Springville. So it was a great central location for everything. About that time, things were humming along. I thought, man, I've been going at this for a while. It's 2002, the beginning of 2002. We're doing the registration system with Governor Leavitt for the Olympic Games, for the torch reelers. Woohoo! I'm being asked to go on the governor's jet to go to a torch relay tour opening. I mean, everything is going on. It's all exciting. The company is growing. Great things are happening. The technology's coming around. I'm not having to spend a lot of hours figuring out how to get things done. Macromedia was starting to surface and make that a little bit easier, and Adobe and other companies like that. So there was everything going on, and things were looking good. And one day, right when the Olympic Games started, I had my internal bookkeeper come in to me and say, did you handwrite this check for $17,000 to this company I don't recognize? And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I didn't. Wonder why that happened. Well, I came to find out that my outside CPA was embezzling from me that very night. And she got a little bit sloppy and decided to write a check to American Express, and we were able to track back to American Express by just giving them a list of names. And the funny thing with Amex is they will not tell you whose account it is, but if you list somebody's name, they will say it's that person's account. So that was not mistake number 4. I would say that was sit down, put your head on the desk, and bawl like a baby moment number 1. 9 checks over a year and a half, totaling almost $70,000. For a small business, it was huge. For me, it was a wake-up call. And I look at these public corporations today where they're locking people up because, the CEO doesn't know, and realize just how easy it can be to kind of not really know what's going on in your organization as it gets bigger. Something I didn't even think about when I started the company. Needless to say, at the end of the day, I was paid back the money, something that's a very rare occurrence, and we got past that very terrible moment. Unfortunately, it was followed up by the dot-com crash. At that time, there were only 5, maybe, interactive new media agencies in the state of Utah. By the time the dot-com crash was done, I was one of the only ones left in the state of Utah. It took getting a out-of-the-box approach to cost-cutting measures. It took making personal sacrifices, taking wage reductions, things like that. And it took staying very focused at what we were good at. What are we good at? How do we stay in the minds of our clients so they know what we're good at, so that when the economy reemerges, it reemerges and we come out better for it. Luckily for us, we didn't have a lot of dot-com customers. We had a lot of technology customers. But we weren't working with flowers.com or agency.com or whoever. We were really working with larger Fortune 500 corporations, and it was lucky for us because that was a major factor in why we did survive. Our account base simply wasn't as affected as some others at the time were. So that was probably my next big moment, though, in the business. You plug away, you think, wow, got a great idea. You've been going now, it's 2002, you've been going for 9 years. Things get locked and loaded, and you no longer have to worry about anything. And something arises. And I guess that's one of the takeaways I want to leave with you is being a business owner or an entrepreneur is a never-ending set of varying circumstances, some very, very rewarding and some very, very aggravating. And it never goes away. It really doesn't. You gotta have the chutzpah and just ready to take on the challenge pretty much, every day when you wake up. So that was a big time period, 2002. From 2002 till the end of 2008, we were able to quadruple revenues. We hired back. We laid off a few people. We hired them back, and we experienced exponential growth worldwide. Working in Europe, working in Asia-Pac, working in South America with programs. We grew with Utahs, and we grew our business out of state. We're actually about 50-50 out of state now. So they were very, very good growth years. We got up to about 30 employees. Fairly good size for a bootstrapped, self-funded organization. And I finally started to make some money, which was really nice. So I guess that's another lesson I want to talk about is money the reason why you're doing it? Because guess what? It's not guaranteed, and it could not come for quite some time. And that includes if you're VC funded. These CEOs that work for VC funded organizations are not necessarily sent away to the bank. They're actually under very rigorous goals from both the VCs and the shareholders of the firm to perform. Private companies that are self-funded that don't have that have some pros and cons. One is you can pretty much shape the company the way you want to shape the company. You don't have those controls that you have to worry about. You can stay a little truer to your vision if you had a vision for the business. Sometimes you can't always stay true to your vision when you're a VC-funded organization. And you can go with the ebb and flow of what you need to make. I took a wage reduction in 2002, but was able to make a significant amount of money in years that followed. So that's a good thing, because right now my exit strategy is two-folded. I'm either going to get bought by a strategic buyer. I've had 4 offers in the last 5 or 6 years. Or I'm going to just continue to plug this and just try to keep putting money away for retirement. So I have to think about those considerations. And constantly evaluate where in the growth of the business are we at, and is that a good time now to start talking about acquisition. Timing, as well as what the deal actually looks like, become very important. So that brings us to today, quite a few years later. So 20 years after I arrived in the state, going on 16 years after I decided to start the company. And half our employees are devoted to a creative services agenda. They are creative directors, artists, animators, things like that. They live, breathe, and sleep the brand because they're constantly working within major brands, and they're extending that brand for business purposes and doing things like that, hence a lot of the production work that I was able to show you earlier. The other half of the company is very technical, so I was not able to shake off the geeks over the years. Web technologies, developers, as well as Flash, Adobe Air, things like that. So lots of different types of technologies come into play. And we do several things for clients. We try to distill down because we have a lot of things that we do for customers. And they want to know, what are you really good at? Well, we're really good at a lot of it, actually. But if you want to try to bring it into something that's a little easier to understand, I always say we excel at creative services for traditional and online campaigns and communications for sales, marketing, and training organizations. The second big thing we do, we build web technologies that support those objectives, and they really do. Oftentimes, we're doing things where we're doing a direct mail campaign. They have partners. They want them to go on the web, be able to put their logo on it, stay in the Intel brand, and do it all on the web. So we do things like that. So it's a perfect fit, and it really backs up my vision that if we understand the objectives of the communications to begin with, so going back to the production days, we're in a better position than anybody to decide what the web apps need to do and how you use them. Really, really important. And I say that because there's a lot of web apps out there today. Not many are targeted for people who actually need to use them, especially marketing, communications people, training people inside organizations, etc. So we developed tools using a lot of these people as guinea pigs, which they probably didn't appreciate, and made them so that they were easy to use for the audience that we were doing all creative services work for in the first place. So what do I decide to do? In 2003, well, I decided that it's about time. I have never had a business advisor come in and give me some key advice. So I got referred, and I let a friend's business advisor come in. And I had to kind of reel this guy in because he's like, well, we spend a month and we need to survey all your people and look at everything you're doing and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to tell you what to do with this business when we're done. And you're going to pay us thousands of dollars to do so. So I said, okay, I'll do this. I felt like it was a pivotal time in the company. We'd conquered a lot of our technology challenges. We really were trying to figure out, do we just go full on with this web thing and leave like doing direct mail and direct response behind? Or do we stick with some of the stuff? What do we do? And it turned out to be not just an evaluation of the people that work with me, but an evaluation of the numbers. So what do the numbers say? Important lesson number 4. And I could be off on my sequence of numbers, by the way. Just a trick to get you guys, fooled. So anyway, big lesson, because what the numbers say is critical, and the numbers should be telling you who you need to serve, what your priorities should be, and what you really do with your business. And you should be looking at that all the time, not just to say, do I have enough money in the bank? So we spent about 3 weeks going through a variety of exercises with the consultant, and he looked at all the numbers, and he came back and he said, at the end of the day, I think we need to just get rid of all the creative services. Just do web and technology. That's where it's at. That's where we think you should go. Well, I looked at my numbers. My numbers were 50-50. And I said, well, you know, you're telling me to go do this, but my numbers are 50-50, 50% creative services, 50% technology. Why would I just get rid of the creative services arm? And he says, because that will allow you to focus on the web, and you will grow exponentially as a result. Well, I went back to my partner, and I really struggled with this, and I wrote the check to the company for thousands of dollars for this, you know, critical advice I received, and said, you know, I just don't bottom line feel good about it. And I decided, why don't I go back to the key fundamentals I believed in to begin with, which is this strategy of understanding the creative objectives, putting us in a much better position than anybody else to create technology tools to implement on the web. And I went back and I said, you know, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not doing it. I realize I just paid for this advice, but I'm not going to do it because I believe they cross-pollinate. I believe that because we're working with creative services objectives, we get referred into technology situations. I believe that because we're doing technology products, we get thrown into creative situations. And you know what? All creative is enough to drive anybody crazy. I don't know how many of you have ever worked with a graphic artist or creative director at all, but they're interesting people to work with. They're very different than I am. And then technology people can drive you nuts. I mean, they're, you know, analytical and don't believe you until they get hit over the head with a sledgehammer and things like that. So there were dynamics also that I started to think about, and I said, you know, I don't want to do that for a lot of reasons. The money is saying different, the dynamics are saying different, and I believe the next level of growth for the company is going to be because we stuck with creative services and we stuck with technology and we took both key competencies very seriously and stayed focused on them. And as a result, between 2003 and 2008, we grew exponentially. And it did work. That was the strategy and continues to be the strategy today. Both key business units feed each other consistently. And it makes it nicer for the customer. I mean, it's a great value proposition for the customer. They don't have to go to a lot of different groups to get certain things done. They've got a company that has business units within it that can go ahead and provide those kind of solutions. So that embarked us on just several new possibilities where we started doing games and we started doing viral content, and we needed email marketing, so we needed a mass mail product that you could email with, and they all intertwined and continue to this day. So I guess the key things that I wanted to leave with you and talk to you about today are how long it takes, going on 16 years. I would be willing to bet most people in this room were probably 11 or under at that time. Not always a money thing. Money good some years and not so good other years. Lots of lessons to be learned. Lots of color got lost. Not just not getting the technology from time to time, but not getting why I was getting ripped off, and not getting why certain things would happen in the business with employees and other complexities that came up. What do I like to do? Well, I love to do communications, and I love to do business development. That's a big strength of mine. I love producing, really looking at what are we doing this campaign, what's going to make it successful. I hate finance. I don't like HR. I'm not a real public relations buff. And I guess this brings me to another really, really key message I want to leave with you, which is if you decide to run your own business and it grows, you don't always get to do what you wanted to do to begin with. So what do I do today? I spend probably 60% of my day in operations, human resources, and finance. Good times. And I've learned a lot. I learned whether I like finance or not to be good at it. I need to understand the difference between red and black. I need to understand, not to accept credit. And I need to understand forecasting, realized revenue from deferred revenue, all kinds of accounting things I never in a million years thought I was going to have to remotely understand. I found myself having to understand. Human resources is for drama queens. Not my bag. But I have to spend a fair amount of time because at the end of the day, it's up to me to motivate people. It's up to me to retain employees. It's up to me to create a culture that makes people want to work for our company. And that gets interwoven with benefits plans and 401ks and everything else you got to do along those lines. So I find myself doing a lot of that. I probably spend 20% of my day doing business development, one of the things that I really love. And being visionary, looking at things, making sure they look uber cool and everything else. I'd like to do a little more social networking. I don't have a lot of time for Facebook. But really, if you think about what my business does, and you think about how we evolved, I've got to sooner or later make more time for social networking. It's just got to happen. If I don't do it, I need to have an employee then who's focused on that. So I've got to figure out a way to, accomplish what I need to accomplish. So big lesson, you don't always get to do what you want to do year after year after year. So what kind of factors do you need to be a leader in a small private enterprise, such as Verite? Well, I think you need to have absolute tenacity. You need to be able to just let stuff roll off your back. Got ripped off? No big deal. Just let it roll off your back. You need to have a tomorrow is another mentality. Scarlett O'Hara, that small piece of her that had that optimism, is really, really critical. Not talking about the other attributes of Scarlett O'Hara. But she could wake up the next day and Rhett Butler just threw her down the stairs and she still thought tomorrow was another day. You absolutely have to have that because there's going to be some really crappy days to wake up to. Big challenges. You need to have a real commitment to the vision for the business. That makes it more fun. If you're doing something where you went, I thought this would be a really good idea, it's going to make it a lot more fun to do it over time. And when things get tough, you don't have enough employees, but you just got handed this huge contract, so you got your act together right away, and there's no great employees out there because, the current economy was such that the labor pool was small. Whatever the challenge is, you need to be able to work through this. And they're going to change and evolve all the time. So having a commitment to your vision of why you did it in the first place will remind you, oh yeah, I do really love this, I remember that, and I'm going to keep doing it. Because now you've got a lot of responsibility, so you have to have the ability to take on a lot of responsibility. When you get to employee number 25 and you realize they have 6 kids and they're relying on your benefits package and they have families and you have company picnics and you get to know these people. It's a tremendous responsibility, even on a small scale. Look at those people at AIG, all the people they had to think about. Okay, I'm just joking. Just thought I'd see if you're still listening to me. It's really hard. Those people are on your shoulders. Their goodwill and their ability for their families to thrive is on your neck. And it could be that way year after year after year. So you need to think about that. Because that requires that you roll with the punches in economic downturns and have a recipe that allows you to emerge successfully and continue to grow. Things that we're starting to face ourselves this year. We're seeing some of our corporate clients kind of slow down and noticing trends in the industry, temporary, but difficult nevertheless. And I think it's our roots in financial conservatism that have really helped us and will continue to help us through this recession, because we're a debt-free organization and we've been wise about what we do with money. A lot of owners need to really think about that. What are you doing with the money? Are you taking all the money home so there's nothing left in the bank? Are you planning for a rainy day? Are you planning for a recession? What are you doing? All those types of decisions. So if you want to be a leader of a company, you need to really think about those things. I don't know how long I should be going on just, Well, I was thinking it'd be great to engage with you guys, and I'd love to get some Q&A. So I think I pretty much said what I wanted to say. I've given you a history. I've told you about why we started. I've given you some of my biggest, blunders and tough experiences, along with a lot of growth and reward. And why don't we open it up to Q&A? Yeah.
I'm wondering, prior to you having the business consulting days, who did you have as mentors or people that helped you along the way?
Well, one of my early mentors was a gentleman by the name of Peter Genero. He founded the Utah Information Technology Association. And they were one of the first organizations I joined because I was looking for a fit at a company, and I knew if I networked with an association that I could really build the business and those relationships going that I needed to. So he was a huge mentor for me. Going into the mid area of the company, I grew to know Mike Levitt quite a bit. We did a lot for Mr. Levitt, not only when he was governor, but for all of the Olympics and things like that. And he turned out to be a great mentor. The guy actually answers email. I was just like, no politician answers email. And I just thought one night I'd just send him an email, ask him about something we were going to be working on. And he actually emailed me back. I was blown away. So he was also a great mentor. As the years went by, I was surrounded with board members and other associates who also were really critical to helping me shape my decisions and decide what I did with the company. Yeah?
When you were speaking about vision for your business, is now after 16 years, do you feel that your business is still complying with the same vision that you had to begin with, or has it evolved over time?
Well, the basic vision has remained the same. So, the vision of taking communications to a digital platform, CD, DVD in the early days, has just been complemented by the availability of different technologies, both web-based, CD-based, and everything else. I would say that really helped with the growth of the company and kept us to the original vision. It's probably really the tools and opportunities because of those tools changed how much we could offer within that vision. So expanded the vision. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you go to school for things dealing with technology, or did you just happen to get a job doing that? So that caught your interest? Or how did you actually
Yeah. Okay, well, this is a funny story. So I went to college. I was a law enforcement major. Okay, I'm going to date myself a little here, but at the time, Angie Dickinson was on the show. It was Policewoman. It was, you guys were zygotes back in the day, and I just thought she was so cool. I wanted to be a cop. So I went to school for that. And when I got to the end of the road on that, I had an instructor who took me aside and he said, "Why are you doing this? I just don't enjoy you shooting people and doing things cops do." He said, "I'm going to throw you off a little bit from the program, and I'm going to send you to intern with the Santa Clara Police Department, not the San Jose Police Department, which was where all the real bad stuff happened, but the Santa Clara Police Department." He says, "I want you to do that for 6 weeks, and then I want you to come back. And I want you to tell me if you really want to complete this program, because I buy it." So I went sping off, and I was so excited to go intern with the Santa Clara Police Department. Exciting things were going to happen. Angie Dinson was growing inside me before my very eyes, and I did for 6 weeks was 2 things: domestic violence and traffic citations. Nothing else. None of the complex, crime scenes that Angie Dickinson was looking at in the show. And it was awful. It really was. It was an eye-opener. The instructor was really, really good to me and being so honest with me and sending me to go do something so brutal. And it was really brutal. And then I started to get to know some people that were in the field, and I realized how difficult that field is and how wearing that field is. Well, at about that time, a friend of mine said, "You're a fast typist. The VP of product management at a company called Mohawk Data Sciences needs a secretary. Why don't you just take a break from school? It sounds like this interning thing's a nightmare, and, maybe you're not going to finish the program. Why don't you go take that job?" And that is what I did. I went into computers, and I loved it. And Mohawk Data Sciences is no longer around. Their prime competitor was Prime Computing, and it was at a time when word processors were just being invented. So if you wanted to go on what they called a dumb terminal, and they were kind of dumb, you'd type a sentence in, and you had to hard code that sentence before you went to the next sentence. So you had to look it over and make sure that sentence said what you wanted it to, because within that line of characters, you could only go back once easily. Oh, yeah. And hence, computers were born. And then you could go to the next line, and if you screwed up, you were pretty much stuck with whatever you did. So it was just the infancy of computing. Mainframes and big, huge computer systems were really all there was, and it took mainframes to do what you guys can do on a Mac or on a Dell computer in, 2 minutes or less. There just wasn't the technology there, but I found it just absolutely captivated me right away. Wound up working for the company for about 2.5 years, and then from there segued into software sales. So that's a little bit about my odd background. I like to say I have a street degree. Any other questions? Great.
I just wanted to ask you, for a lot of students, I think it's hard for them to landing some of these huge clients that you have. You told your story about how you got Novell. But how did you get some of the others? Was it word of mouth after Novell, or did you just, did you have some industry contacts that you got?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it was word of mouth. And again, there weren't a lot of companies doing what my company did. There's a ton of them that do what my company does now. Both in and out of state, but at the time there weren't a lot of companies that did what I did. So it was kind of nice. I had like a 5-year time period where I could really capture a market with very little competition. It was really nice. So it was through word of mouth. It was through the associations. I started to hang out with the networking. People I knew in Silicon Valley that I would go and start to talk to them about what I was doing, and then over time they would decide that they wanted to try working with me on a project. So just kind of that grassroots referral and getting the word out. And then we got on and really took full advantage of the web. I mean, the web is just like a level playing field. You can be a puny little business, or you can be IBM, but the puny little business can have the same perceived value and world perception that IBM does on the web, whereas brick and mortar, I mean, if you're in a dinky little building, you're in a dinky little building. So it presents phenomenal opportunities for entrepreneurs and great opportunities for companies in general, whether they are your traditional brick and mortar type company or B2B. It's just fabulous. So it also helped tremendously. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you. Wow. Cool.